What would really happen if you stopped doing everything just to please him? It sounds simple, but behind that question lies a deeper truth about human psychology. Love does not grow stronger when it is constantly fed with indulgence. Love grows when there is space, when there is just enough distance for two people to see each other clearly. Too much giving, too much availability, too much effort to always be present can quietly kill attraction. Because what is always there, what is always offered without condition, is often taken for granted. Think for a moment about your own life. When something is endlessly available, you no longer feel the urgency to protect it or the desire to cherish it. The same applies to relationships. When you constantly appear, when you answer every call, when you anticipate his needs before he even asks, he may not consciously intend to, but he begins to believe that your presence is guaranteed. And what is guaranteed loses its spark. It stops feeling special. This is not about playing games. It is about understanding human nature. Carl Jung once explained that we are drawn not only to what we already have, but even more strongly to what we cannot fully grasp. A slight distance, a pause, an absence, these awaken curiosity. They ignite longing. They remind someone of what they risk losing. Without that reminder, the mind drifts into complacency, assuming nothing will ever change. Ask yourself, when was the last time you allowed him to miss you? Not as a strategy, but as a natural consequence of living your own life, of choosing not to be endlessly available. When you create that space, you are not punishing him. You are protecting your energy. You are showing him, silently, that your world does not revolve entirely around his comfort. And in that silence, something powerful happens. He begins to notice. He wonders why you are not there like before. He questions if something has shifted. That questioning is the spark of awareness, and it cannot exist without distance. Of course, many women fear that stepping back will make them forgotten. But the truth is the opposite. When you step back with dignity, you become unforgettable. Because absence is not emptiness. Absence is weight. It lingers. It unsettles. It forces the other person to look inward, to reflect on what you meant to them. It is in those quiet spaces, when you are no longer pouring every ounce of attention into him, that he finally sees you clearly. So the paradox is this: by doing less, you create more. By not showing up constantly, you make your presence more valuable. By giving him the gift of missing you, you restore the balance of attraction. Love is not built on endless sacrifice. It is built on rhythm, closeness, and distance, giving and receiving. And when you understand that, you step into a new kind of strength. The strength of someone who no longer needs to prove her worth, because her worth speaks for itself in every moment she chooses herself first. Scarcity has always been one of the most powerful forces in human behavior. When something becomes less available, its value rises instantly in the mind. The same rule applies to relationships. When you stop appearing everywhere, when your presence is no longer guaranteed, a new dynamic emerges. Your absence begins to carry weight, and that weight creates attraction. Think about it. If he is used to seeing you respond within seconds, if he has learned that you are always available for his questions, his needs, his moods, then he no longer has to wonder. There is no mystery, no uncertainty, no spark. But the moment you step back, when you stop showing up at every call, something shifts. He notices the silence. He feels the gap. And suddenly, questions begin to rise in his mind. What is she doing? Why hasn't she reached out? Has she found something else to focus on? That uncertainty creates curiosity, and curiosity is the seed of desire. Carl Jung often spoke about the unconscious pull toward what is not fully understood. Human beings crave what they cannot completely hold in their hands, When something feels certain, the mind relaxes, but when something feels uncertain, the mind becomes alert. It pays attention. In relationships, this means that when you are less predictable, less constantly available, you become more fascinating. Not because you are playing games, but because you are living in alignment with your own value. Scarcity does not mean coldness. It does not mean ignoring him out of anger or creating artificial drama. True scarcity is simply the natural outcome of giving your attention to what matters most: your growth, your peace, your own life. When your time is valuable, when your energy is carefully protected, every interaction with you becomes more meaningful. He starts to realize that being in your presence is not something to be assumed. It is something to be earned. Notice how this works in everyday life. Limited editions sell out faster. Exclusive invitations create excitement. Even in nature, what is rare is often the most desired. We do not crave air because it is everywhere, but we crave perfume because it is rare and fleeting. In the same way, when you are everywhere in his world, your presence fades into the background. When you step back, you become the rare fragrance that lingers in his memory. This is not manipulation, it is balance. Too much giving distorts the relationship and leaves you empty. But measured distance creates respect. It draws him closer not through pressure, but through longing. He begins to see you not as an endless source of attention, but as a person with her own depth, her own mystery. That is when the true shift happens. He starts to chase, not because you forced him, but because he feels the absence of what he once took for granted. So remember this simple truth: presence without absence loses meaning. Scarcity is not about withholding love, but about letting your value be seen clearly. When you choose to step back, you do not become less. You become more memorable, more intriguing, more cherished. Pulling back your energy is not about punishing someone. It is not about teaching him a lesson or creating artificial distance to make him chase you. True withdrawal is far more powerful. It is about choosing where your energy flows, deciding what truly deserves your time and attention. When you begin to see yourself as a source of energy, not an endless supplier for others, everything changes. Imagine your energy as water. If you pour it continuously into a vessel with cracks, no matter how much you give, it will never be full. That is what happens when you give your constant presence, your care, your emotional labor to someone who has not earned it. The more you pour, the more you deplete yourself. But the moment you turn the flow back toward yourself to nourish your own roots, to water your own garden, you stop running dry. You begin to bloom again, and that blooming is what others notice. This is why silence should not be confused with punishment. Silence, when chosen consciously, is protection. You protect your peace, your time, and your growth. And from that protection comes attraction. Because a person who values herself radiates a different kind of energy. She does not chase, she does not beg, she does not explain. She simply exists with confidence, and that existence is magnetic. Redirecting your energy can take many forms. It may mean investing in your mind, reading, learning, expanding your skills. It may mean taking care of your body, eating well, exercising, dressing in a way that reflects how you want to feel. Or it may mean nurturing your spirit, spending time in silence, journaling, exploring creativity, or simply enjoying your own company. Every time you do this, you send a silent message: my world is full, with or without you. Carl Jung once said that the outward journey always begins with an inward step. When you stop pouring into someone else without measure, you discover parts of yourself that had been neglected. That rediscovery is not only healing for you, it is also deeply attractive to others. Because a woman who invests in herself carries a glow that cannot be faked. Her attention becomes precious, her presence becomes rare, and her absence becomes felt. The paradox is clear. When you stop trying so hard to be noticed, you become impossible to ignore. Your focus on your own growth creates a natural gravitational pull. He begins to sense that you are no longer orbiting around his world. And in that moment, he feels the shift. He wonders why your energy feels different, why you no longer give endlessly. That curiosity pulls him closer. But now the power has shifted, not because you manipulated, but because you chose yourself. So remember, withdrawing your energy is not an act of anger. It is an act of love, love for yourself. And that love, when embodied fully, becomes the strongest form of attraction. Silence is often misunderstood. Many people fear it, interpreting it as emptiness or rejection. But in reality, silence is one of the most powerful forms of communication. It is not the absence of meaning. It is a signal that forces the other person to listen more carefully, to pay closer attention, to question what is really happening beneath the surface. When you choose silence, you are not being passive. You are speaking in a language that does not use words, and in many cases, that language carries more weight than anything you could ever explain, because explanations can be dismissed, words can be twisted. But silence creates space that cannot be ignored. It unsettles the mind, and the unsettled mind begins to search for answers. For a man who is used to constant access, your silence is like an unexpected mirror. He cannot predict your next move. He cannot assume what you are feeling. That unpredictability shakes his sense of control. And in that uncertainty, he begins to feel discomfort. But here's the truth. That discomfort is not about you. It is about him. Silence confronts him with his own dependency. It forces him to recognize how much he relied on your presence, your reassurance, your emotional labor. Carl Jung spoke of the shadow, the hidden aspects of ourselves we often avoid. Silence is one of the few tools that makes someone face that shadow. When you stop filling every gap with explanations, when you no longer rush to soothe or clarify, he is left with nothing but his own thoughts. And those thoughts reveal truths he may not want to see. His fear of being unimportant, his reliance on your attention, his inability to stand without your constant affirmation. Notice how silence works in daily life. When a room suddenly goes quiet, everyone turns their head. When a conversation stops mid-sentence, the pause draws more attention than the words before it. In the same way, your silence becomes louder than any declaration. It whispers questions in his mind. Why isn't she saying anything? Did I do something wrong? Has she changed? These questions, born out of silence, create the very tension that fuels reflection. But here is what makes silence truly powerful. It is not aggressive, and it is not cruel. It does not attack. It does not punish. It does not demand. Instead, it simply exists. It gives you peace while challenging him to confront his own reality. And because it comes without drama, it cannot be dismissed as manipulation. It is simply the truth of your absence. So the next time you hesitate to stay quiet, remember this. Silence is not weakness. It is strength in its most elegant form. It communicates boundaries without needing arguments. It exposes ego without shouting. And most importantly, it protects your energy while forcing him to realize that your voice, once always present, is not guaranteed. That realization alone can change the entire balance of the relationship. The true test of a man's character begins the moment his ego is no longer constantly fed. As long as you are there to affirm him, to answer every message, to soothe every insecurity, he can live comfortably in the illusion that he holds all the power. But once that supply is gone, once you no longer provide the steady stream of validation, something remarkable happens. his mask begins to slip. Without your attention, he faces a crossroad. For some men, the absence of validation feels unbearable, because what they truly wanted was not love, but the feeling of being important. These are the men who disappear when the spotlight fades. Their silence tells you everything you need to know. They were only drawn to the reflection of themselves they saw in your eyes, not to the reality of who you are. When your attention no longer props up their ego, they move on in search of another source. But then there are others. The ones who feel your absence not as a blow to their pride, but as a wake-up call to their heart. These men begin to realize that what they valued was not just the praise or the reassurance, but you. And that realization compels them to act differently. They don't just reach out with empty words or half-hearted gestures. They show up. They take steps to close the gap. They demonstrate, through consistent behavior, that their interest was never just about being admired, it was about building something real. Carl Jung described how the ego resists discomfort, but also how discomfort can strip away illusions. By stepping back, you are not punishing him. You are creating the conditions for clarity. His reaction to the absence of your energy reveals whether he was drawn to love or to vanity. If it was vanity, the silence will chase him away. If it was love, the silence will draw him closer, because real affection does not vanish when applause stops. Think of it as a filter. Your withdrawal sorts those who only wanted to be chased from those who are willing to chase. It separates the ones who were addicted to the game from the ones who are serious about connection. And the best part? You do not have to do anything dramatic. You don't need ultimatums, long speeches, or emotional confrontations. The absence of your energy speaks for itself. So pay attention to what happens when you stop feeding his ego. Does he fade into the background, proving that your attention was the only thing he ever cared about? Or does he step forward with effort, with intention, with action? That difference is everything. Because in love, words are easy, but actions are undeniable. And when a man is truly invested, he will show you, not because his ego demands it, but because his heart compels it. One of the greatest mistakes people make in relationships is believing that explanations are what create understanding. We often think that if we just say the right words, offer the right reasoning, or give enough reassurance, the other person will finally see our value. But the truth is, real clarity does not come from explanations. It comes from experience. And sometimes, the most powerful way to be understood is to say nothing at all. When you stop justifying your silence, when you resist the urge to leave clues, when you no longer craft messages designed to provoke a response, you create something far more effective than any explanation: a void. And that void forces him to think for himself. He cannot lean on your words to interpret the situation. He cannot rely on your constant presence to ease his doubts. Instead, he must confront the questions in his own mind. Why has she pulled back? Why isn't she responding like before? What has changed between us? That internal questioning is the beginning of awareness. Carl Jung often noted that the unconscious speaks through symbols. In this context, your absence becomes the symbol. It is not about being cruel or manipulative. It is about allowing space for truth to emerge. Because when you step away, you are no longer doing the emotional work for both of you. He is forced to carry his part of the weight. He is forced to decide whether his interest is strong enough to take action. And here lies the most important distinction. A man who is immature will try to pull you back with words, promises, excuses, declarations that sound sweet but hold no substance. But a man who is truly invested will do something different. He will act. He will move toward you, not because you demanded it, but because he chose it. His behavior will show whether he values you enough to bridge the distance. Words fade quickly, but actions reveal intention. Think about it in practical terms. If you stop texting first, does he notice and initiate? If you are no longer quick to respond, does he find new ways to stay connected? Or does he let the silence stretch until it becomes permanent? These are not small details, they are answers. And the answers are not spoken by you, they are revealed by him. This is why restraint is so powerful. By holding your silence, you give him the chance to prove himself without interference. You no longer rush to explain, to fix, to rescue the connection. You let the space breathe. And in that breathing space, the truth surfaces. Either he steps toward you, showing that his feelings were more than convenience, or he drifts away, proving that his interest was shallow. So remember, you do not need to chase, and you do not need to explain. The right man will not be lost in your silence. He will be found in it because silence gives him the stage to demonstrate who he really is. The moment you stop revolving around him, something extraordinary begins to happen. You return to the center of your own life. Instead of living in reaction to his moods, his messages, or his attention, you begin to build a world where you are the priority. And in that shift, you discover a strength that no relationship can ever replace. Many women unconsciously give away their power by waiting for recognition. They spend their days hoping for a compliment, a gesture, or even just a sign that they are seen. But when your sense of value depends on someone else's approval, you will always feel unsteady. The ground beneath you will always shake because it is not yours, it belongs to him. The day you decide to stop waiting, the day you recognize that your worth is not something he grants, but something you embody, is the day you truly begin to shine. Carl Jung described individuation as the process of becoming whole, of reclaiming the parts of yourself that were lost in the shadows of others. In relationships, this means separating your identity from the role of caretaker, pleaser, or follower. It means remembering that before you met him, you had your own life, your own joys, your own identity. And those do not vanish simply because you fell in love. When you reclaim them, you glow differently. The world sees it. And yes, he will feel it too. Think of the woman who chooses to dress beautifully, not for his compliments, but because she loves how she feels in her own skin. The woman who laughs at her own jokes when no one is around, because joy does not need an audience. The woman who pours a glass of wine, opens a book, or takes herself out to dinner without hesitation. That kind of self-centeredness is not selfish, it is magnetic. Because people are drawn to those who radiate fulfillment from within. When you make yourself the center, your life becomes richer. You invest in friendships, in passions, in health, in dreams that extend beyond the relationship. Ironically, this is what makes a man notice you more, not because you are chasing him, but because you are no longer chasing at all. You have turned inward, and that inward light reflects outward in ways he cannot ignore. This is the paradox. When you no longer seek his recognition, you receive it. When you stop needing him to validate you, he sees your value more clearly. Because confidence, grounded in self-respect, cannot be overlooked. It changes the energy of every interaction. You are no longer the woman waiting for a place in his world. You are the woman who already has a world of her own. And he must now decide if he is worthy of being part of it. So remember, you are not the orbiting satellite. You are the sun. And when you shine from your own center, you attract naturally without asking, without chasing, without proving. The strongest boundaries are not the ones we announce. They are the ones we live. You don't need to declare, "I deserve better," 100 times. You don't need to rehearse speeches or make dramatic ultimatums, because words without consistency are quickly forgotten. What truly defines your worth is the choices you make over and over again in silence. When you refuse half-hearted love, when you decline the role of a backup option, when you stop answering to convenience, you are setting a boundary without a single word. That quiet decision carries more force than any statement you could ever make, because while words can be argued against, actions cannot. A man can ignore what you say, but he cannot ignore what you no longer allow. Carl Jung wrote that what remains unconscious eventually shows up as destiny. In relationships, this means that if you don't consciously decide your worth, you unconsciously accept less than you deserve. Boundaries are the tool that prevent that cycle, and they are not built on arguments, they are built on consistency. Every time you respond instantly to his careless text, you reinforce a boundary that says, "I am always available." Every time you forgive betrayal without true change, you reinforce a boundary that says, "My love is negotiable." But the moment you stop, the moment you decide that your actions will reflect your words, the boundary becomes unshakable. Think of it this way. A locked door doesn't need to explain why it's locked. Its strength lies in being closed. In the same way, when you stop entertaining shallow gestures, when you decline last-minute invitations that treat you like an afterthought, you are closing a door that was once too easy to enter. And a closed door is respected. It makes a man pause. It makes him think. This does not mean you need to be harsh or unkind. Boundaries are not walls built from anger. They are lines drawn from self-respect. You don't need to punish anyone. You simply stop rewarding behavior that drains you. That subtle shift creates a powerful ripple, because suddenly he realizes the old patterns no longer work. He cannot coast on your forgiveness. He cannot rely on your availability. He must rise to meet your standards, or he will lose his place in your life. And the beauty is this: you don't have to argue for your value. You live it. You embody it. You let your consistency do the talking. Over time, the silence of your boundaries speaks louder than any speech could. It says, with calm authority, "I am not here for less than what I deserve." So remember, real boundaries are not drawn in words. They are carved into your daily choices. And when your choices are steady, they communicate one undeniable truth: you will no longer settle for crumbs because you are the whole table. Silence, when chosen with intention, is not a strategy to make someone chase you. It is not a trap, not a game, not a punishment. True silence is an act of returning to yourself, to your balance, to your own center. When you step back, you are not secretly hoping for his desperate reaction. You are simply reclaiming the energy you once scattered outward and choosing to hold it within. That choice, in itself, is powerful. The purpose of this silence is not to manipulate, but to realign. When you stop speaking just to fill the air, when you stop reaching out just to maintain connection, you create space for clarity. And in that space, two things become visible. First, you see yourself again, not as someone defined by his recognition, but as a whole person who existed before him and will continue beyond him. Second, you see him more clearly. Without your constant effort, his real intentions are revealed. If he was only there for attention, he will fade into the background. But if he was truly invested, he will step forward, not with words, but with actions. Carl Jung suggested that what you do not make conscious will rule your life as fate. Silence, then, is a conscious act of awareness. It removes you from the cycles of overgiving, from the endless search for approval, and it breaks the pattern of proving your worth. You no longer need to explain, to justify, or to convince. You embody your value simply by existing in peace. And here is the paradox. When you no longer seek to be chased, you become infinitely more magnetic. Because nothing is as compelling as a woman who is calm in her own presence. She does not argue for attention. She does not beg for love. She does not perform for validation. She stands as she is, and that quiet strength speaks louder than any declaration. The right man will feel it. He will not run from your silence. He will respect it. He will stay not because you demanded it, but because he chooses to. And his choice will not be about ego, but about sincerity. Because real love is not proven by frantic words or empty promises. It is revealed through consistent presence, through genuine actions, through commitment that does not depend on being constantly fed. So let this be your reminder. You do not fall silent to test him. You fall silent to hear yourself again. You do not pull away to make him desperate. You pull away to remember your own wholeness. And in that wholeness, you discover the most important truth of all. You never had to prove your value. Your calm, steady presence was proof enough, because in the end, the strongest attraction is born not from chasing, but from being centered, being whole, being at peace with who you are.